Good morning to you all, and this is my first class with you, the fourth semester students of the MA in English course evening session, Vidyasagar University, Midnapur, and we will be reading today Girish Kannad's Hayavadana, which is there in course number 403, option A, unit 3. And while looking at uh, your uh, course, we will see how Girish Kannad contributed very significantly to Indian drama in English as well as Indian drama uh, in Kannada. Originally, he was a writer writing in the Kannada language, and later on, he also began to translate his plays to English, and because of this, there is a change in the chronology of his plays, which we will look at as we um, start our discussion on Girish Karnad as a playwright, and we will see how the chronology of his Kannada plays is slightly different but very significantly from the chronology of his English plays. So we have Hayavadana for you. Now, this is Girish Karnad, who was born on the 19th of May 1938, and he passed away last year on the 10th of June. He was quite ill for some time, and he passed away after a brief period of very serious illness. So, as I was telling you, he was a playwright writing in Kannada and English, and he was also an actor, a film director, and of course, a social activist. He was a very down to earth and humble person. Some of the distinguished awards which he has received include the Bharatiya Jnanpith Award, the World Theatre Ambassadorship, and the Padma Bhushan. It goes without saying that he has received the Sahitya Academy Award, the Gubbi Virana Award, the Saraswati Award, among others. As I was telling you, this is the chronological sequence of the plays he wrote in English. Although the first play which he wrote was Yayati, and I will not go into the details about the background of writing that play, which is very interesting. He had actually thought that he would be a poet after the fashion of T.S. Eliot and W.H. Auden because they were his ideal authors. But suddenly, when he was on his way to England on a Rhodes Scholarship to study in Oxford, he wrote Yayati in Kannada to his own surprise. However, when he translated or rather transcreated his plays into English, it wasn't Yayati which came first, it came much later in the chronology. He translated Tughlaq first, and that too because he was requested to do so so that it could be performed in English. So Tughlaq was translated in 1972, Hayavadana in English 1975, Nagamandala 1990 after a gap of nearly 15 years, Tale Danda 1993, The Fire and the Rain 1994, The Dreams of Tipu Sultan 2004, Bali, The Sacrifice 2004, Flowers 2005, A Heap of Broken Images 2005, Yayati in 2008, Wedding Album in 2009, Boiled Beans on Toast 2014, and his last play, Crossing to Talikota, posthumously in 2019. Now, some of the characteristic features of his plays, not all, but just some of them are: the content is always Indian. He speaks about the experiences of Indian persons. The language for the plays which we will study is English. So they are Indian characters belonging to an Indian culture, but they are speaking in English. And this may sound a bit odd, but nevertheless, as has happened in former plays by Indians writing in English, there is no hindrance in understanding the Indian culture and milieu in spite of the language of the play being English. In Girish Karnad's plays, women are given adequate, respectable space, and it is not that Karnad allows them this space, but they have their right to be there because he is not a condescending patriarch. He is a person who believes in humanitarianism. He believes in the respectability of all individuals, be they men, women, or even transgender persons, and therefore everybody has a right to be where he or she is. And of course, relevant theatrical forms and devices are used for the performance of his plays. Now, a rough categorization of his plays for our convenience. Those which are based on history are Tughlaq, Taledanda, The Dreams of Tipu Sultan, and Crossing to Talikota. Those which are based on folk tales are Hayavadana, Nagamandala, and Flowers. So this section is of special interest for us because Hayavadana is included here. Those based on myth are The Fire and the Rain, Bali the Sacrifice, and Yayati. And those based on modern urban life include Anju Mallige, which has not been translated into English, but it is about Indians living in England, A Heap of Broken Images in English, Wedding Album in English, and Boiled Beans on Toast. Now, let us see what Karnad has got to say about his creating Hayavadana. He recalls the urge behind the creation of Hayavadana in the introduction to three plays. And there he says, the idea of my play Hayavadana started crystallizing in my head right in the middle of an argument with P.V. Karant, who ultimately produced the play, about the meaning of masks in Indian theatre and theatre's relationship to music. Elsewhere, he says, in Acrobatic Between the Traditional and the Modern, that, and I quote from him, by the late 60s, any seminar you went to in India, the question was what to do with folk theatre. And this problem was endlessly debated. And thus, he began to consider writing a play based on the techniques of folk theatre. Now, Hayavadana, by way of technique form, is a wonderful presentation of an adaptation of a purely folk form of theatre available available in uh, Kerala, Karnataka, parts of Tamil Nadu, and Andhra Pradesh. And this is called the Yakshagana. What Girish Karnad did was he used this form of folk theatre and brought it to the proscenium space, thereby making certain adaptations about which we have discussed in our class when we were having our normal classes before the suspension of classes owing to the lockdown because of this COVID-19 pandemic. Now look at the content of the play. It is a story of two friends and one woman. Where did Girish Karnad get this story from? The story is actually an Indian folk tale which Karnad came across not in any Indian text but his reading of a novella in German translated to English, and the name of the novella written by the Nobel laureate Thomas Mann is The Transposed Heads. Karnad read an English translation of The Transposed Heads, and immediately he noticed that there was enough possibility of theatrical presentation in this story. The original story which Mann came across was from the Katha Sarita Sagar, and his reading of the Katha Sarita Sagar is from Heinrich Zimmer, who was an Indologist. It was from Heinrich Zimmer's study of the original Sanskrit storehouse of short stories, the Katha Sarita Sagar, that Thomas Mann got his story. Mann created The Transposed Heads, a novella based on this story. Girish Karnad wrote Hayavadana from Mann's text in the form of an English translation. So that is the line. I repeat, first you have the Kathasarit Sagar, which Heinrich Zimmer studied and wrote about. Then Thomas Mann found the story in Zimmer's study and wrote the transposed heads in German. So from Sanskrit to German by Zimmer, from Zimmer's German to Mann's German novella in the transposed heads, from an English translation of the transposed heads to Girish Karnad's plays in Kannada and English called Hayavadana. So from a short story to a novel, and from the novel to a play. That is the movement of the story of Hayavadana. Apart from this, you and I, when we were children, we must have read our own Betal Panchabimshati or the Betal Panchabimshika, in which a similar story appears. So that is the source of the story of Hayavadana for you. Now let us look at the movement in the philosophical or theoretical approach to this story. First, as we find it in the Katha Sarita Sagar or in the Betal Panchabimshati, both of which are basically collections of oral folk tales, we find that there is a typical patriarchal angle to it. All these stories were also a kind of method of communicating to the listeners the social expectations of the behavioral patterns, particularly of women, because oral stories were more popular among women and children who were mostly confined to their homes, and there was very little entertainment in the ancient times. Women did not travel too far. So, one very important way of entertaining themselves and the children that they had to take care of was to tell stories. And therefore, these stories were very specifically intended to communicate what was expected by society of a woman. So, in the original story, the question regarding the identity of the husband out of the two friends whose heads get transposed is actually one which points towards a moral crisis. Who will be the husband of the woman? Naturally, the man whose head is the husband's will be the woman's husband will be the man with whom the woman will go, because the head is our social identity, not the body. Therefore, the moral crisis for the woman is resolved in this manner. So it is comparatively a simplistic solution to the problem created by the transposition of the heads of the two friends. When we come to Man's story, in the transposed heads, he poses a psychological crisis, because by the time Man is writing his novella, we are very much into a very complex world, and he is a Westerner. So he will not look at the story like an Indian. He has no compulsion to present a moral angle to the story. So that is why Man makes an enquiry into the psychological crisis of the three friends, the wife and the two men in her life, the husband and the husband's friend. It is a psychological problem when one knows something which was subdued in the original story, where the moral angle was given greater significance. Here we find that the psychological crisis is more important, because all three of them know what has happened, and all three of them find it very difficult to come to terms, to accept the situation, which is a real life situation in which they find themselves. But when we come to Girish Karnad, he has moved even further. When he was in England, he had seen many plays by the Western playwrights, particularly those by Brecht and even Ionesco and Beckett's plays. So he had seen a lot of existentialist theatre. And as a result, that influence would definitely be there on him when he was writing Hayavadana. So what does he do now? In his play, he brings in an existentialist angle. That is, what is existentialism? Very crudely put, the existentialist philosophy points towards the here and now, and not to the future. Like we are undergoing an existentialist crisis because of this COVID-19 pandemic. You may ask why. Look here, whenever we ring people up nowadays, they are telling us, we ask them, Kamon acho, how are you? And they say, Achi, I am still there. This is an existential reply to a very polite question of courteously making enquiries, because I am here for the present. I do not know whether I will be there in the future. So today, all over the world, people have stopped nearly making plans for the future. You will not find a single person telling you, পুজোর ছুটিতে বেড়াতে যাব বা পুজোয় ঠাকুর দেখতে যাব. That is no longer significant now. We are all more interested in the here and now. That is existentialism for us. Therefore, Karnad makes an existential enquiry into the existence of these three persons, that of completeness. Are they complete after the transposition? All three of them. That is the question that is being asked by Karnad. So now we will see what happens to the play, and I will now stop sharing the slides, and I shall try to get back to the board, if you can see it, and do some board work with you.
ভিডিওটা খুব হেজি আছে, বড় দেখা যাবে না।
Why not? You cannot see the board?
Now I can see. ঠিক আছে, তখন হেজি ছিল প্রথমে।
Okay, Now it is clear. The moment I move backward, actually I want to
Yeah.
stop sharing the thing. Okay, now can you see? Can you see the board in your screen? Is it okay? Can the board
Yes,
be
ma'am.
Huh.
seen?
Yes,
Yes, ma'am.
All
a
right.
bit back, then it gets clear.
Here I am. All right. Can you see it clearly? If I move out.
Ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Yes,
All
ma'am.
right.
Yes, ma'am.
So now then, we will do some board work for your convenience. First of all, of the two topics that we shall be discussing today, I shall go to the character of Padmini. Padmini, as the name implies, has been borrowed from the Art of Life texts, and Padmini is a typical kind of woman as described in Vatsayan's book, the Kama Sutra, and many other such books of this kind. She is extremely beautiful, she is extremely attractive, and she is one of the kinds of women who someone's phone has been unmuted. Please mute it. Please mute your phones. Deep Jyoti, please mute your phone. Deep Jyoti, mute your phone because the others cannot hear what I am saying. Alright. So, I will not go into the details of the story because you all know it. Padmini has two men in her life. Padmini has two men in her life. One is Devadatta, the other is Kapila. Devadatta is the son of a Brahmin, Vidyasagar, and Kapila is the son of a blacksmith, Lohita. So they belong to two different categories. He is a Brahmin, he is a Lohar or a blacksmith. So if you look at this, and Padmini is the daughter of a businessman. So she belongs to the Vaishya caste. So, as this story points out, there were no caste distinctions in those times when this story had formed itself. A Brahmin could get married to a Vaishya's daughter if the match was preferred by both parties, and a Brahmin could be very good friends with a blacksmith's son. So, this is the basic premise on which the story develops. Therefore, when Devadatta's head gets transposed with Kapila's head, you realize that it is a very interesting thing, not only physically, but when you look at it from the social perspective, then also it is very interesting because now a Brahmin's body has a Lohar's head, and a Lohar's body has a Brahmin's head. So, this is a very interesting angle to the story, which is not mentioned anywhere in the play in detail because Girish Karnad knows that his primary target audience, which is an Indian audience, if they wish to, then they can see that such casteist connotations are not very significant in the context of this play which he has created. So this is very interesting. It shows that Girish Karnad wanted to erase all kinds of caste and class hierarchies which were embedded in the Indian society right from the beginning of his theatrical career. Of course, for this, there is his personal background. His mother was very liberal, his father was very liberal. So, this kind of a liberal perspective was there in him, as a result of which he could conceive this kind of play. This is something which has not been hinted at much. So, this is something which I have realized on several readings of the play. So then, Padmini, Devadatta, Padmini, Kapila. She seems to be there somewhere between these two friends. Although, when they were just friends at the beginning of the play, in part 1, you find that there was no Padmini in the beginning. There were just two friends who were one mind, one body. So, this oneness was very important for them. They had one mind and one body. Apparently, they seemed to be two separate persons. Now, this one mind, one body thing becomes quite ironical in the course of the play because this oneness gets disturbed with the arrival of Padmini in their lives. Again, if you look at it from a gender perspective, then critics might say that again there is a woman who has disturbed the relationship between the two friends. Then comes the question of restraint and control. This is very significant. Padmini first saw Kapila before she had even laid eyes on Devadatta. But Devadatta had seen Padmini. Kapila hadn't. So the line or the cycle is like this. Devadatta first saw Padmini and was so enamored of her that he wanted to marry her. So he tells Kapila to act as mediator, a kind of ghatak, and see that the negotiations can progress towards his getting married to Padmini. So Kapila goes in search of Padmini, and there is a bit of a comic situation over there in part 1, as you know, when he finally traces Padmini, and they have a very interesting dialogue between the two of them, which shows that Padmini is very intelligent. And she has a fine sense of humor. So she is not an ordinary docile girl. She is not docile. She has her own mind. She likes to do what she thinks is all right for herself. That has been pointed out in her first interaction with Kapila when Devadatta is not there in the picture. Then the story skips to Devadatta and Padmini being married, and now then Devadatta does not like Kapila to disturb their marital life. By then we realize that Padmini is with child. She is expecting a baby, which means that their conjugal life has been very fulfilling. Their conjugal life has been very fulfilling, as a result of which Padmini is with a baby. Now, this baby is very important in the story. Then what happens is they plan to go out to a fair via Mount Chitrakoot, making a shortcut through the forest. And Kapila comes with a cart so that they can travel in it. But then Padmini, Devadatta and Padmini, they have a discussion before that, in which it transpires that Padmini Padmini is not very eager to go because Devadatta by now doesn't want Kapila to react too much with Padmini. So she tries to keep him happy. But, being very intelligent and because she has a mind of her own and her own sense of humor, she finally changes her mind and says that she is eager to go to the fair. Devadatta does not like this change in her decision. Nevertheless, they go. So when they begin their journey, there is a kind of discontentment in Devadatta, and Kapila can sense that, even Padmini can sense that. That is how they begin their journey. On the way, they pause when Kapila goes to fetch some flowers of the tree where the flowers are called the uh, Shodhava Gach, the married woman flower, because in this flower there are all the signs of a married woman. And Padmini and Devadatta, they wait. Padmini is there, Devadatta and Kapila are also there. Then Padmini and Kapila, they go to the Rudra temple, and Devadatta decides to go to Anubrato, please unmute. Please mute your phone. Anubrato, mute your phone. Devadatta now goes to the Kali temple on Mount Chitrakoot. So therefore, in the lives of these three, there is a very significant role played by goddess Kali. And you know the rest of the story. He decides to offer his head to her. He cuts off his head. Kapila follows. Kapila does the same. And now Padmini goes. Their heads are transposed. There is a problem in her heart of hearts. She is very happy because she always wanted a very strong, brawny physique and an intelligent and knowledgeable mind. So now both of them are combined in the same person, and that person is the man whose head is that of Devadatta and the body is that of Kapila. So this is the ideal combination for Padmini, and she waits for a decision. The first part ends here, as you know, and then they decide to go to a knowledgeable rishi who will tell them what to do. And the rishi gives them a very easy solution. He says that the Uttamanga is the one which will decide who will be the husband of Padmini. Uttam means best, and Anga means limb or body parts. And the best part of the human body is obviously the head. So the head will decide who will be the husband of Padmini. The logic is that since the Kalpavriksha is the best of all trees, therefore, similarly, the best always is a marker. Therefore, the man with the head of Devadatta and the body of Kapila will be Padmini's husband. This combination goes off to Devadatta's house. The man with Kapila's head and Devadatta's body is something which does not fit into this scheme. So this man, in great distress, goes away into the forest. And as we know that the head determines the body, so the head will also direct how the body will behave. And in the course of the play, we find that Devadatta's body head gradually makes Devadatta's, that is Kapila's original body, become what Devadatta's body was before the transposition, and the same for Kapila. By that time, the child has grown up. Whose child is this? That is the question. Obviously, the child apparently is the child of the man with Devadatta's head. But this body was not Devadatta's. It was Kapila's. And the body which had created the child is now with the man who has Kapila's head. So this child is both the child of this man and the child of this man after the transposition. That is a very tricky question, because the identity of the child, the existential crisis of the child lies embedded in the transposition as well. Now, in this play, therefore, the existential crisis is that of four persons: Padmini, Devadatta, Kapila, as well as the child. All of them have now been a part of a crisis that has arisen out of the transposition of the heads of the two men. And the story goes on in the Vidyasagar as well as in the Betal Panchavinshati. The story had ended here. There was no child, and Padmini goes off with the man who has Devadatta's head. But in Girish Karnad now there is a child. This child is therefore very important to study the existential crisis, as we shall see in the course of the performance. Therefore, the story goes on. Devadatta goes to fetch dolls for the child, and Padmini takes the child and goes in search of Kapila. She finds Kapila with Devadatta's body, which has now followed the instructions of the head and has become strong and brawny. She starts living with this man. When Devadatta comes, the two men realize that it is not possible for them to survive. They fight a duel and kill each other. Padmini performs sati. Now, her performing sati then is very ironic, apparently, because a sati is a pativrata woman. And Padmini, as a result of the transposition, could not remain pativrata. And apart from that, she had gone in search of Kapila and she had started living with him. So her identity as a pativrata becomes questioned as a result of this play. And therefore, Kannad allows this desire in Padmini to get what she wants, and her being intelligent and her being a woman with a free mind of her own, which had been indicated in her first meeting with Kapila, is expressed once again when she decides to look for Kapila and live with him. So, this element of living together is therefore very interesting in a modern context in an Indian play. And therefore, when she decides to perform sati, is apparently ironic, but Girish Karnad wants to show that she was honest to her own desires. She was honest to herself. She did not have any duplicity as far as her desires and her faithfulness to her desires were concerned. Is it important for a woman to obey social dictates which have been imposed on her? Is that necessary? Is that important? Or can she have a life of her own against these social dictates? That is what Girish Karnad explores in this story in the play. So you see, the character of Padmini is not a unilinear character. Padmini is an Indian woman but she is also modern. How? Not chronologically by years, but she is modern because she has an awareness of her own freedom. She has an awareness of her right to her own life. That is why you find that the marriage negotiation between Devadatta and Padmini is carried out by Kapila. The elders in the households do not feature in that negotiation. So, this is how Padmini is portrayed in the play. She is aware of her own freedom. She is aware of her own rights to her life. And while abiding by social customs, she also finds a way of her own. That is very interesting. So, she does what many Indian women do. They do not cross the limits set upon them by society. But within the parameters of those limits, we Indian women know how to create strategies of survival for ourselves. And in most cases, we succeed because we know that there is no alternative. And we also know that if we have to survive, then we have to create our own ways of survival. And Padmini does the same. But because she is a character in an artistic form, she goes a little beyond that, as if she is inviting other women to be a little more daring in asserting themselves, in asserting their desires, in expressing the fact that they will not abide by what a patriarchal society imposes upon them. So Padmini is that kind of a character who is a question mark herself and who also raises many questions. So Padmini should not be judged according to social norms, because that would be taking her back to the Vedal Panchavinshuti or the Katha Sarit Sagar. You cannot judge her according to moral terms. You will have to look at her as an existential person who wants to be complete, who wants completeness, who is in search of completeness in her own way. With that, I will come to a stop regarding the first of the two issues that we hope to discuss today. And now I shall go to the title of the play, which is Hayavadana. Haya is horse and Vadana is face. So it is about a horse face. I will not go into the details of the story, but I will just come to tell you as to what made the play get its title from Hayavadana, who again is a very interesting character. The story can be divided into this kind of a structure, which apparently makes no sense. This is how Girish Karnad had conceived his plot. So, Hayavadana actually forms a very interesting part of the structure of the play. This is the outer frame where you have Ganesha, who is worshipped before the play begins, because you know Ganesha is the god who blesses with completeness. So the play is regarding completeness and the quest for completeness. Therefore, Ganesha forms the outer frame of the story, the god who will bless the performance with completeness. That is why he is worshipped. The next frame is provided by Hayavadana. When he enters the acting space unexpectedly, narrates his tale, goes off to the Kali temple in Mount Chitraput, returns towards the end of the play when we have nearly forgotten him. We are more engaged with Padmini, Devadatta, and Kapila, and we have a solution. The inner story is that of Devadatta, Padmini, Kapila, and the child. This is the frame. Therefore, just as Ganesha, because he is a god, his incompleteness cannot be questioned. It is eternal. And although ironic, he is the incomplete god who will bless a performance like all other artistic forms and even business with completeness and fulfillment. So that is Ganesha, not to be questioned because he is above human kind. Then you have Hayavadana, who is half Apsara, half human. And therefore, Hayavadana is the character who crops up between the divine and the human worlds and tries to find a kind, Karnad tries to find a kind of link between the two by using this character of Hayavadana. So when Hayavadana returns, I am erasing this frame. When Hayavadana returns at the end of his becoming a complete horse, when he wanted to become a complete man, he returns as a complete horse because his head was that of a horse. Therefore, the head will determine what he will become. So he becomes a complete horse. And on becoming a complete horse, he is still unhappy because he hasn't lost his human voice. So he wants to now lose his human voice. How will that be possible? How can he do that? That happens when he finds fulfillment. How does he find fulfillment? He finds fulfillment when he is with the child and both find fulfillment in each other. So the child laughs for the first time after his parents again is questionable, are dead. And the horse, Hayavadana, loses his voice and begins to neigh. So then the child's laughter and the horse's neigh mingle to show that they have found a kind of completeness in each other's company. So that is also there. Now from here, you can ask a question on the element of innocence introduced into the play. Since both of them have been innocent without any desires of their own, they have found fulfillment. And because Padmini, Kapila, and Devadatta, all three of them had their own desires which they wanted to fulfill at the expense of someone else or some other people, that is why they did not find satisfaction, they did not find completeness. That is also implied. Therefore, the play has many aspects which can be explored in spite of a lot of critical work on Hayavadana. Hayavadana still has possibilities of research and exploration. It is an excellent play, the first of its kind, in which the modern stage was seen to present a form of a very old practice of theatre called the Yaksha Gana, and many other plays of this kind followed later on. So, with that, I will end my discussion of Hayavadana. Now, if you have any questions or any ideas to share with your friends and with me, you can unmute your phone one by one and express your views. In English, please. Questions? Raka?
Hello, ma'am.
Yes, who is this? Onubroto, please.
Piyush.
Onubroto? Okay, Pijush. Yes,
I
Pijush?
am Piyush, ma'am.
Yes,
Hmm. I have two questions.
yes.
Why Devadatta is called man of mind and why Kapila is called man of the body? My first question. Second question, why the second act begins as the narrator repeats of same questions? What is the solution?
Yes, okay. Now, obviously, Devadatta is the man of mind because he is the son of Vidyasagara and he has been trained to read and read books, be a critic, be a scholar. And Kapila is the son of Lohita, the blacksmith or Lohar, and he has been trained to do physical work. That is why Devadatta is usually called the man of the mind because his body is not capable of performing the labor which Kapila can perform, and Kapila's mind cannot think in the way in which Devadatta can think. So, by calling Devadatta the man of a mind, a very strong mind, and Kapila a man of a very strong body, this is the indication. It also shows that when the two of them are called two friends, they are one mind and one body. It shows that because of this, it appears that one's head compensates for the others and one's body compensates for the others. So the two form a very good combination, like one complementing or supplementing the other. For the other question which you have, the series of questions, what is the solution to this problem? That actually triggers off the thought process in the mind of the audience as to how will this solution, this problem be solved? How will a solution be found to this very difficult problem, because Padmini is, number one, a married woman. She is not a girlfriend that she can walk away with someone else. And to cap it, she is pregnant. So there is the question of the child's identity. So the solution is not very easy as far as Padmini and the child she is carrying are concerned, because they crop into, they actually appear in this problem. That is why so many times this question is asked as to what is the solution to their problem. And that is why you have that break in the play when the Bhagavata is inviting the audience to go out and have some tea and think over the solution, the possible solution to this problem, because it is a very serious problem, no doubt. Have I answered your question, Piyush? Okay, anybody else?
Hello, ma'am. I'm Joyshri.
Yes, Joyশ্ree?
Ma'am, in the folk tale, we can see that the tale ends up with a message of unfulfillment. And in Girish Karnad's Hayavadana, in the end, we find a fulfillment. So, is Girish Karnad is giving us any message, or is this okay to change the theme of the folktale?
Okay.
Is he not disturbing the folktale?
All right. You have many questions in one, actually. Have you finished asking questions?
Yes, ma'am. Yes.
Okay. Number one, the folktale also has a conclusive ending, because keeping in mind the very patriarchal, the very strictly traditional patriarchal social setup, a moral solution to the problem has to be accepted by all. So in that kind of a very patriarchal setup in the folktale, the moral solution is acceptable. The husband, the man with the husband's head, is the man with whom the woman will go, and she has to be satisfied. She cannot express her personal desires in that kind of a scenario. So that was self-evident. Girish Karnad, in the modern times, wishes to release woman from that patriarchal domination. Why will not she be able to express what she wants? Why will she not try to get what she wants in her own way? And that is why his Padmini behaves in that particular manner. In this story, therefore, the three of them have to die because they cannot find fulfillment in this kind of a social setup. But the child can find fulfillment in the companionship and in the company of Hayavadana, when he rides on the back of Hayavadana and both of them are highly satisfied. So the child finds his laughter and Hayavadana his name. That is the answer to your first question. To your second question, folk tales are always in the oral tradition. They have been written down later on in order to document these tales. Therefore, folk tales are very flexible, and it depends on the narrator as to whether the tale will be changed, will be altered with additions, subtractions, new elements. So every time a folk tale is told, it is actually a new story, because you will find that the narrator will consciously or unconsciously introduce into the narrator of that oral narration of that oral tale, his or her, it is usually a her own cultural background as well as her own message, particularly to other women in that household who may also be listening to the story as the narration is being made to the children. So there is always this indirect way of communicating a message. Folk tales, therefore, are very flexible. A folk tale can always be changed, can always be altered, and in that alteration lies the life of that folk tale. Otherwise, it is dead. Okay, so in changing the tale, Girish Karnad is not tampering with it. He is reinterpreting it in the modern scenario, in the modern context. Anybody else?
I have a question.
Yes, who are you?
Ma'am, Namrata.
Okay, what is your question?
Ma'am, Devdatta and Padmini, they marry and Padmini is pregnant with their son 6 months later. And they went to the trip to Ujjain with Kapila. Then, ma'am, why there is a question that who is the father of the child?
See, after the transposition of the heads, it is Devadatta's head and Kapila's body who is given the
Yes, ma'am.
identity of the father of the child. Here, this is where you are certain. But what about the man with Kapila's head and Devadatta's body? The body is the primary factor in the process of procreation. Therefore, the man with Kapila's head and Devadatta's body is the biological father of the child. But the socially designated father is the man who now has Kapila's body. So both men are equal claim to the child. One because he has the Uttamanga, and therefore because of the Uttamanga he is the father of the child. But the body which he now possesses had not fathered the child. So there is this very critical crisis regarding the identity of the father of the child. You get it?
Okay, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am.
It's okay. Thank you. You're most welcome. Anyone else? Okay then. Shall we call this a day? Any further questions?
Ma'am, I'm Somani.
I cannot hear you. Who are you?
Hello.
Yes. Okay, you are Shomani. Yes. What is
Ma'am,
your question?
Somani,
What is your question?
is there any significance of dolls conversation in the, ma'am,
Yes.
is there any significance of dolls conversation in Act 2?
Yes, there is a significance of the conversation of the dolls because they are commenting on the domestic life of Devadatta and Padmini and the child as he is being brought up in this kind of a domestic situation. Padmini is not a very grihokarme nipuna kind of a woman. She is very absent-minded, and this is reflected in the child who is not brought up in a very proper way so that he learns some politeness and courtesy. The child is very unruly as a result, which is reflected in the way in which he treats his dolls, and therefore the dolls are making adverse comments on the domestic state of affairs as well as the behavior of the child. That is the role of the dolls in this story. Anything else?
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you. Does anybody else have a question? Okay, then I'll stop here as far as the recording is